This lesson is about parallel and perpendicular lines. So let's take a look at parallel lines first. And there's a relationship here between the slope and the y-intercept. So if you look, both of these parallel lines, right, if we extend them, they're never going to touch, have a slope of 3. So parallel lines always have the same slope. And if you look at the y-intercept, one of the y-intercepts is 8 and the other one is -4. They have different y-intercepts. If the y-intercepts were exactly the same, like if this one here was 3x, the equation was y equals 3x plus 8, they would be the same line. They would be right on top of each other. That wouldn't be parallel. So they have to have a different y-intercept. All right, so now let's take a look at perpendicular lines. So perpendicular lines intersect at a right angle. Okay, so taking a look at the red line, the slope is 3. And taking a look at the blue line, the slope is -1/3. Well, how do I get from 3 to -1/3? Well, I would flip that fraction, right, because it's really 3/1. I would flip it, and I would also change the sign. That is the rule for perpendicular lines. Now, it doesn't matter what the y-intercept is. If it's the same or it's not the same, it doesn't matter. So it's just the slope you want to talk about here. So what I would write out here is the slopes are, and this is like a formal way of writing it. Instead of saying we flip them, we change the sign, the slopes are negative reciprocals. Negative reciprocals. Now, reciprocal means flip. Okay, probably most of you guys know that. It doesn't mean that it's always a negative slope. It basically what you do is you negate the slope. So if the slope was positive, I negate it, making it negative. But look at it in reverse. What if I have the -1/3? If I negate -1/3, 2 negatives makes a positive, and then I take the reciprocal, so I'm getting positive 3/1. So the signs always are going to change. Okay, so let's just do a couple quick ones here so you can see how to do this on your own. Find the slope of a line. We're going to do A parallel, B perpendicular to the given linear equations. First step is you have to get your equation in y equals mx plus b form. So in this case, we want to, because it's multiplied by -2, we want to divide by -2. A -3 divided by -2 is going to be a positive 3/2. You always want the slope to be a fraction, especially because for the perpendicular lines, we have to flip it. So leave it as a fraction, reduce it down. This one is fine how it is, already reduced. And then -2 divided by -2 is +1. So we're just writing the slopes. Well, parallel lines have the same slope. In y equals mx plus b form, let me just write this out here. M is the slope. So parallel lines have the same slope. It's 3/2, right? Perpendicular lines, you take your slope. You're going to take the negative reciprocal. So I flip it and I change the sign. So that would make it -2/3. Let me just show you one more. Okay, so again, we have to solve for y. Otherwise, you don't know what the slope is. So we're going to subtract 4x from both sides. And we're going to get 8y equals, now these are not like terms, so we're going to write out as -19 minus 4x. Next, you want to divide by 8 to isolate the y. And divide this. Now, -19 divided by 8 is going to be a decimal, so just leave it. Doesn't matter. Leave the fraction. And a -4 divided by 8, that's also a decimal, but we can reduce that to lowest terms. -4/8 reduces to -1/2 x. You can use the math fraction button in your calculator if you need to. Okay, so here's our slope. The slope's in front of the x, so the slope's -1/2. Parallel lines have the same slope, so the slope is -1/2. And perpendicular lines, you're going to flip the slope, right? Reciprocal, so flip it, but also negate it. So if I flip this and change the sign or negate it, I would have a positive 2/1, which I'm just going to write as 2. Okay, because negating it, 2 negatives make a positive. That's why it's a positive 2. Let's try one more question, number 12. It says to determine whether the two lines represented by the equations y equals 2x plus 3. Now that's already in y equals mx plus b form, which is good. And 2y plus x equals 6. This one we're going to have to solve for y. Are either parallel, perpendicular, or neither, and then we have to explain. So, okay, let's solve this for y. So I'm going to subtract x from both sides. So we have 2y equals 6 minus x. They're not like terms. Next step, divide by 2. And we get y equals 6 divided by 2 is 3, minus, now there's really a 1 next to the x, so it's really 1 over 2, so 1/2 x. So let's take a look here. Focus on your slopes, okay? So the slope of one of the lines is a positive 2, and the slope of the other line is a negative 1/2. Now we know they can't be parallel because parallel lines have the same slope. We'll see if they could be perpendicular. If I have positive 2, if I take the reciprocal and then negate it, would I get negative 1/2? Yes, you would, because remember, it's really 2 over 1. So flip it, negate it, you get the negative 1/2. So the two lines are perpendicular, and when you explain, what I would just say is what we wrote on the front. The slopes are negative reciprocals. The slopes. Getting a little messy here. I can only write so much, and the numbers look good, but handwriting, not. It looks like a kindergartner wrote it. Slopes are negative reciprocals. There we go.